What's up guys, it's Alex, and today I've got a pretty cool video for you guys. But before we get into that video, I want to talk to you guys about what's going on here. So I'm not where I'm normally at, which is out in the boat or out in the garage doing my videos. I've kind of set myself up a little bit of a studio space. So as you guys can see, I got me a fish up here and my drones right here and some camera lenses and my camera bag and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to start building a little studio to do tips videos in so that I can create some cool content and have a cool environment to do it in for you guys. But like I said, I got a cool video for you guys today, and today we're going to be talking about crankbaits and water clarity and how they kind of play hand in hand. So we are moving into one of my favorite times of year, and that is the spring and the pre-spawn. It is the last week of February. Next week is March. That means the warm weather is coming. This past week we had days in the 70s, almost into the 80s, which has really helped to warm that water temperature up. But one of the things that we always have in the spring is a lot of rain, and that rain does a couple things to the water. It, number one, helps it to warm up, but then it can also dirty it up as well, and you can have some very contrasting watercolors from one end of the lake to the other. Some of the video clips that I'm going to show you guys here in a minute are literally on the same lake, just about a 30-minute drive apart, and we had chocolate milk to about 7-foot visibility, and that can really affect the way fish bite, and you really have to be able to adjust on the fly the crankbait that you're using to get those fish to bite. And there's a lot of baits that you can use in the pre-spawn to get some really quality bites. One of my favorites is just the crankbait, and I want to talk to you guys about crankbait colors because I get a lot of questions about what crankbait color do I use where, or what style crankbait do I use where, and we're going to talk about a couple different styles of crankbaits and a few colors that I like to use in some different kind of water clarity. So this first video clip that I'm going to show you guys, I'll kind of set it up for you. This was up in the river. We found some 50 to 55 degree water temperatures. This bass was sitting on a secondary point with the wind blowing into it, and he was sitting in about 1 foot to 1.5 foot of water, and the water clarity was very, very muddy. It's what I like to call coffee creamer water. It looks like someone poured a cup of coffee and then poured a bunch of creamer in it, and you kind of get that light brown color. And this bass was sitting up in maybe 1 foot to 1.5 foot of water, and we had maybe 6 inches of visibility. So watch this clip, then we'll come back and we'll talk about the baits that I like to use in that sort of water clarity. Dude, I knew that fish that Ben caught was big because he caught it on that plug right there. There he is.
Got him?
Yep, I got something. Yep, I got him.
Secondary.
Yep.
Can we move?
I get him up here next to the boat. I don't even know where he's at. He's under the boat now. Can't tell if it's a smallmouth or a largemouth. Little largemouth. Barely got him hooked too. Look at that. He's pretty, man. He's a little chunker. Look at that.
Hell, man.
He is. He's right on the bank too, dude. I mean, not like inches of water.
Was he?
Yeah. God, look how pale he is.
Right on the bank.
I mean, dude, inches. Like, I mean, like I come off around that little rock right there, you see it, and he ate it. All right, see you later, bud. So as you guys can tell, that bass was pulled up really, really shallow, and there's a couple reasons for that. Number one is obviously that muddy water. The muddy water is going to warm up a lot faster than clearer water does. That's why we were getting those 50 to 55 degree water temperatures that we were finding. And then number two, when that water's muddy like that, those bass like to pull very tight to cover, so that makes them move up shallow. They like to pull up to things like brush piles, dock posts, lay downs, rock piles, or just individual boulders and things like that, because a bass's brain is really, really small, and if they can put themselves against something, they feel like they're protected and something's not going to sneak up on them and kill them in that muddy water. So one of my favorite crankbaits to use, and probably my favorite crankbait to use in dark, muddy water, is a square bill, and a square bill is going to do a great job in that shallow water full of cover. A square bill does a very good job in this situation because number one, the bill that it has on it helps it to deflect off cover very easy, and it helps it to keep it from getting hung up. And then number two, with most square bills, and what I like about this little 6-cent square bill in particular, is that they are very buoyant. So if your crankbait starts to get hung up, you can quit reeling it and it's going to float up, and then you can start reeling it again, and it's going to help you to avoid getting hung up. Now let's talk about the square bill, why does it do so well in muddy water? Number one is the way that it works. A square bill has a very wide wobble, which puts off a lot of vibration and a lot of disturbance in the water, and it displaces a lot of water. This means that even though that water is really, really dirty, you're going to still be able to hit that bass's lateral line, and you know, even though they can't see it, they'll feel it, and you'll be able to get them to react by what you're going to actually throw color-wise, which are these bright, vibrant colors. This one I like a whole bunch. It's this orange color. As you guys can see, we got the methylate on the belly that transitions into that traffic cone orange and into that purplish blue back that we've got on there. And what that does is it gives those bass something to react to. It contrasts that dirty water very, very well. So when they feel that vibration coming, those bass will kind of start to key in. They'll start to look around, try to figure out where it's coming from. And then when they see the flash of those very bright colors and they see that contrast of that dark stripe on that thing and the contrast of that bright methylate stripe, they'll react to it, and you can get bass to bite just like I did that one in that super shallow water. Now this next video clip I'm going to show you guys is from a different lake on a different day, but it does a very good job of showing how just changing the color of a square bill can get you guys some bites. So this water wasn't really super dirty and it wasn't really super clear, but we found the kind of middle ground. On one end of the lake near the dam, the water literally was probably 15-foot visibility. On the other end of the lake near the river, the water was 6 inches visibility, even darker than the water I was fishing in the video before with this square bill right here. And so we kind of found where those two watercolors started to mix, and we found some water that was probably 3 to 4 foot visibility. We found some water that was in the 50-degree range because obviously it wasn't as muddy as it could be, so it wasn't warming up as fast, but this was towards the end of the day. The water temperature had peaked out at that 50-degree range, and we found some fish on a stretcher bank. And this fish in particular does a great job of showing what bass do when the water starts to get muddy and how they pull up onto the bank. So let's watch this clip and then we'll discuss the bait that I used.
Boy. Oh my God, yes.
Net?
Yes. Smallmouth. Maybe a largemouth.
You need net?
Yeah.
How's this seat going?
Huh?
How's this damn seat?
Yeah, like it's pretty much sit on top of it. There's one. Hell, Jeff. We're gonna go up through here, dude. We'll fish till dark.
Alright, so as you guys can see, that bass was a little farther off the bank and a little bit closer to the boat when he bit, and the reason for that is those bass hadn't completely transitioned up yet. The water had just started to muddy up, so those bass felt like they needed to transition up, and they were going to transition up just like the bass in the video clip before and get up in close to that structure and get up into that warmer water, but they hadn't completely got there yet, so I opted for a square bill like this one right here. This is a Strike King 2.5. It's going to dive a little bit deeper than the square bill I was talking about before. It'll get to that 6 to 7 foot range, even 8 to 9, depending on the line size that you use. And then it's just a little bit bigger of a profile, which did a very good job of mimicking the bait fish that were hanging out up there as those bass were transitioning up. So like I said, they were transitioning. They had come from about 10 to 12 foot of water, and they were sitting anywhere from 6 to 8. And what I was doing is I was actually throwing that crankbait up there and cranking it out of very shallow water, and it would steadily drop off to about 5 feet. And when it got to about 5 feet, it would drop off to 7 or 8 very harshly, and that's where those bass were sitting. So this crankbait was able to get down there and get those bass to react. And then the color I was using was obviously a little more natural. It wasn't those bright methylate colors like the other one was in that dark water, but that white still does a very good job of contrasting the water enough in that semi-dingy water to get some reaction bites. And it also does a very good job of mimicking the forage that was up there, which was threadfin shad. And then the size of this bait also does a very good job of that as well. Now this last clip is some pretty clear water. We had 7 to 8 foot visibility, so these bass weren't even starting to pull up yet. They were still sort of in that deeper water, and when I say deeper, that 12 foot range, so we had to throw a little bit deeper diving crankbait and kind of adjust the crankbaits that we were using to get some bites. So we'll watch this last clip and then we'll talk about the crankbaits that I like to use.
Got him. Big one. Keep him hooked, keep him hooked. That's a good one, smallie.
Oh, dude, that's a stud, man.
That's a good one.
Woo!
That's what I'm talking about. Thank
Good.
you, Lord.
Good job, man.
Get on that trolling motor, bud.
All right, let me grab. So as you guys can see there, that was a main lake bank. So that bank actually dropped off really, really hard. We would throw up into 3 or 4 foot that would pretty drastically, at kind of a 45-degree angle, drop off into 10 or 12 foot of water. So we were throwing a bait like this one right here. This is a little Strike King flat side plug. You guys have heard me talk about this thing quite a bit this year. It's been a plug that got it done for me. And this little mug will dive anywhere from 10 to 12 feet depending on the line size that you're using. Now the deal with this one is it is a flat side, so it doesn't have as wide of a wobble as the square bill does, and the reason for that is that water's a little bit clearer, so I don't need something as loud and as intrusive. That little bit tighter wobble is a little more natural and isn't going to scare off some fish like that much wider wobble of that square bill. And then obviously the bill is a lot bigger on this one in a lot different shape, so it's going to help it to dive a lot deeper. And then the color, obviously, on this one is a lot more natural, almost kind of translucent, and that does a very good job in clearer water or even very clear water of getting some bites, just because it is so natural and it does a very good job of mimicking the forage. Now let's talk about the setup that I use to throw all of these crankbaits, and it doesn't matter if it's the little 2.5, the smaller square bills, the 3XDs, the flat sides, bandits. I use the same rod and reel, and my rod is going to be a 7-foot medium heavy G-Rod Game Changer cranking rod, and this rod is specifically designed for throwing smaller body crankbaits and for throwing crankbaits because it has a lot of parabolic bend. It actually is made of graphene, Toray carbon fiber, and then has glass incorporated into it, and that glass rod helps to absorb the shock of those bites. It helps to drive those treble hooks in and not rip them out, and it helps when those fish get next to the boat to have quite a bit of parabolic bend so that you can fight those fish, and the rod has enough give that you're not going to pop those treble hooks out. And then for the line, I'm using 10-pound copolymer. I have a lot of faith in copolymer. I did a video about this a while back. It's the line that I use. I'll make sure and link it down below so you guys can go check it out. And then I'm pairing that up with a Lew's Custom Pro 6:8:1 gear ratio reel. And what I love about this reel, it has a little bit shallower spool, so it does a very good job of casting that lighter line in those lighter baits. And then that 6:8:1 gear ratio helps me to fish those crankbaits a little bit slower, helps me to keep them in the strike zone a little bit longer, and it helps me to have a little bit more torque. Even with these smaller body crankbaits, that little bit more torque helps you to work those baits a little bit easier. And then that is the setup that I'm using to throw all these crankbaits. So hopefully this video helped you guys out. I know a lot of you guys had some questions about what crankbait colors to use, what crankbaits to use in certain water clarities and certain water depths. So this is kind of a good general overview that'll help you guys get into spring, hopefully get some pre-spawn bites, and help you guys transition into spring, into the spawn. As always, guys, thank you for watching. Any questions or comments, go leave them in the comment section down below. If you're new to my channel, make sure and hit that subscribe button. Go check out some more of my videos. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to go down in the description. I'll have links to all my partners like G-Rod, Lew's. You guys can go check out the rods, you can go check out the reels, and I'll also make sure to leave links for all the baits that I use so you guys can go check those out as well. But as always, you guys are sweet, and thank you for watching.